Holy manoli, is that actually happening right now? Boom. Excellent connection. Excellent connection. Copy. Twitter. Boom. All right. Testing everything. Making things work using the magic of OBS. All right. All right, 5 more minutes, and then I'm going to just spit some terrible policy thoughts at you. Actually, they won't all be policy thoughts. I actually don't know if you can hear me right now. I'm hoping you can hear me right now. All right, so I almost feel like I should just start early just to annoy people. Jonathan, man, you're in it. You're in the talk. You can answer everyone's questions. That will actually be very useful. I had a lot of questions for you that I just put in a talk because they were also questions for everyone else, and I thought we should actually think about them instead of just randomly. Oh, now it says no data, and yet OBS says it's fine. Excellent connection versus no data. It's the same thing. Who the fuck knows? All right, so that's actually really good news. I mean, I'd kind of like to make it just like a Zoom, but that's like almost beyond my technical skills right now. Ryan, the topic is a bunch of stuff. it's almost like we're living in a world where putting the pieces together is really hard. So I spent some time trying to put the pieces together so that you don't have to gather everything off of like various publications and Twitters, and you can sort of just have it. But I did it for me, and then I thought, you know what? I'm just going to share it. Yeah, I guess it's policy focused in a way. I make fun of policy people first because I find them really funny. And then after that, I talk about a lot of other things. I don't know. Nothing's just policy, man. All technology is political now. That's how we're rolling. I talk a little bit about that, but it's not about me. It's more about everyone else. They're bonus ducks. I like if you've ever played Team Fortress, I just don't know how you get that guy saying bonus ducks out of your head. Like that's just an amazingly catchy little phrase that he says, and then you run over a duck and you get a duck. Yeah, I think in theory these things get recorded and then you can watch them later. But I can't promise that because of how great I am at technology. You don't have to listen, Ryan. But now that you are listening, I'm just going to troll you constantly the whole time. That's pretty much how it works. All right, we're going to start in 2 minutes. You could probably watch that chess show that's on. Computers ain't for everybody. I remember when T-Bob said hacking's not for everybody. He was right. He was totally right. Hacking is for the North Koreans, though. Maybe hacking is for everybody. I don't know. Oh, you're going to get some policy mocking. Because they deserve it. That's why. All right, you're going to get some sound bites. They're going to be harsh, too. I have some hot takes. Well, it's more like I listen to other people that for whatever reason get lost in the noise, and then I want to amplify them. And then I pretend they're my ideas. All right. So we're going to give it one more minute because that's what I promised I would do. Oh, you're going to promote now. Well, we get too many people in the chat, and we won't get to ask, Jonathan, what happened in life. Okay. What made me leave the NSA? To be fair, I am a poor fit for an organization that is very large and requires an element of maturity to exist in at age 21 and 22, which is when I left the NSA, like a million years ago. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is my girlfriend at the time was living in Atlanta, and I was like flying back and forth. And there were months I really couldn't even pay my mortgage. And then my salary doubled when I went to At Stake so I could pay my mortgage again. And that turned out to be the right decision financially for me. And I think a lot of people left NSA at that time for the exact same reason, because it was a 2x to 3x increase in salary. And that's a lot, that's like change your life path kind of amount of space in your life. I mean, that said, there are definitely times I regret leaving the NSA. I think it would have been super fun career to try to learn even more. I mean, you learn so much so quickly about a lot of different things that you just can't learn anywhere else. Partially because they've got a very technical design and they have just a huge center of excellence everywhere. And it's rare to see that even in large technical firms like your, defense industrial base is just more diluted. What's next after immunity? I have my resume into a couple places and they're ignoring it right now. And then so if that doesn't work out, probably I will just start annoying people with policy for a while and then while I work on some technical things. Maybe I'll start a new conference. That seems to be the way to go, but probably not for a while. Honestly, I've been learning how to do like other things, like write Chrome exploits and stuff, and that's really cool. It's cool fun. It keeps your brain active. And all right, I'm gonna start. Let's just get this ball on the roll. I need a podcast and a newsletter. This is the podcast, man. It's the new thing. This is what you do. All right. I may or may not be able to see your comments. I'd really like to pop out the chat. Oh, here we go. Magical. Thanks, Google, for thinking of me. So I can... Okay, I mean, this is like... Yeah, maybe I should just be a live streamer. I could play Overwatch and do policy talks. All right, so let's see how this bad boy rolls. Hopefully you can all see that amazing view. Cool. All right, so, you know what? I want to make sure it full screened. It did full screen. It's amazing. Perfect. All right, so I want to start with the fact it's January 26th. We're like 2 weeks into a new administration. I want the right mouse button to work. Come on. Clicky, clicky. Oh, wow. It actually just froze up. Didn't do anything useful. All right, so we're going to do it this way. Even better. Even better. All right, so let me see if I can click on the overview. Okay, so I don't know how many of you guys have played Cyberpunk 2077. The game is amazing. I recommend it on Stadia. But one of the funny things about it is just the way it portrays just don't get on the internet. That's just a better choice. It's just better overall. And so I wanted to start this off by talking about all the sort of like, oh, I had a dry run. This is my dry run. Anyway, so I want to start this off by talking about policy funnies. And the first one is this one, the Cyber Peace Institute, which is, they wrote this article out, they published it up. This is not a small organization. These people make a lot of money doing policy, like millions of dollars. And no one in the organization, when they wrote this article and publicized it, thought that IAAS had any meaning, right? So, like, I started making fun of them a little bit, but I think they were really nice about it, possibly because they're just nice people, or maybe they've had enough money that they are nice in general. They don't feel threatened. But in reality, when you go into so many of these things and you're like, let's talk policy with the other side and see what they have to think, a lot of times they don't even know the basic terminology of the space we're in, but they still want to like essentially dictate their values and their thoughts onto how our world works. And I find that extremely upsetting, but also really funny sometimes because they're just so clueless. And then this other one, I think this was actually a NATO paper that came out. And I think it also just exemplifies the quality of a lot of the research you get in policy, which is nonsense, right? Like, because no one ever pushes back on them. They don't go through peer review as far as I can tell. They publish and that's it. So like, here's some attacks between different things so you can graph it out so you can see what's happening in the world. And my worry is that real policymakers are going to see graphs like this and start making some sort of decisions. And so the more you look at this graph, the more is wrong. Like first of all, I don't know why Black Energy Ukraine is against Russia. There's a million things, like the DDoS on the US banks is against Iran. Like, there's no arrows, so you're not really sure which direction anything works. It's just super frustrating just how poor quality a lot of the visualization and the work in general in policy is. And this was one of those examples. And I was like, this guy was like, he's read it and he like thought he understood it. And the more he read it, he's like, oh, I did not understand it. It does not make any sense. And so like the problem is there's not a better graphic, right? So like a good graphic on that would have been really useful, but there isn't one. So this is the graphic people are going to start working with, and you're going to see it quoted all over the place. Okay, so wanted to start off with two things: SolarWinds, which we've all forgotten about, and the Biden team staffing, which I think is equally important, even if it's a little bit smaller. So the first thing is people, I think, have sort of stopped realizing how huge SolarWinds is, because first of all, Qualys said, oh, we just had a test system up and it wasn't up very often. And that doesn't matter. How many times have we been in test networks and they've had customer data, right? It's like all of the customer data is in the QA network, or it's connected via Active Directory to the rest of your network. And the SolarWinds hackers were just geniuses at manipulating Active Directory in a way that literally everyone on the history of the planet has predicted, right? You really shouldn't have Active Directory because it doesn't meet the basic, what I like to call the Bojangle defense, which is when vulnerabilities in your platform, whatever it is, start sounding like, well, we didn't correctly terminate the Bojangle endpoint, so unfortunately the Whitewind's power dynamic interface wasn't properly configured, and therefore everyone had remote control on all of our things, right? So when it just starts sounding like gibberish, right? That's when your platform is broken and you need to start with something simpler. So Active Directory is one of those things. I don't know who this very bitey individual is, but he finishes it and he's like, look, we have to rip out Active Directory security model. And you do. You just can't. People cannot keep living like this. They don't understand their own networks at all. And it turns out the SVR does. And that's the basic flaw that they have. It's not that they don't trust various software. But I wanted to add good news, and which is most people are liking the fact that the new team coming in is known to everybody. And so having known positions is good, but more importantly, we had a major transition that no one wanted to acknowledge between the Obama and the Trump administrations. And that big difference was reachability. You could talk to the people in the Trump administration over Signal or Facebook or whatever it was. And one of those people was Rob Joyce, right? So you could be like, hey, Rob Joyce, here's a thing that I think you should know on Twitter. And he'd be like, that's cool. I do know about that. And here's some pretty lights that I will show you, right? So that's a change. That's a major change when it comes to how do we do this business. It used to be all these positions were kind of just black holes, didn't want to talk to you. They were in their own little policy worlds, making the wrong decisions for themselves. So that's good. That's a good sign. You can still talk to them. So I want to talk about the North Korean thing, because there's a few things in here that I think are very weird. First of all, I saw some discussions that were sort of, I don't want to say disparaging for the North Koreans, but I think it was Maddie who was like, yeah, I don't know if this qualifies as sophisticated. And I'm like, what you need to look at here is not the sophistication necessarily of the tools they're using, but also of their operational concept, right? So there's something called a ConOp, right, in your standard military parlance. And innovations in that space are super important, right? That's what quantum insert was. And everyone was like, oh my God, right? So these things matter a lot. And what they did here was really operationalize a few things. And I think they've operationalized more things than we're even talking about. And I want to get into that. So they had these little actors on Twitter and other places start talking to people, and then here it's like a little visual studio project. I want to talk about what Forshaw looked at there. And then the thing that I think was really good about this is they had really smart targeting. We talked about SolarWinds and how just incredibly strategic that was. But this is the same level of access, which I think is kind of amazing. It's in theory possible that the Talos researchers did not engage, but also did not get hacked, because it wasn't just engaging where you download the file. It was also just visiting the blog, right? And I think part of their job would be to visit this blog, and they might have gotten popped that way. So they don't know, I guess. They're saying we're fine, but the reality is they don't know. They honestly don't. Thomas Lim came out. I have seen nothing else about this. There's quite a few Chinese hackers I think it would be really weird for the North Koreans to be so aggressive to the Chinese because the Chinese are their main patron. So it'd be good to get some evidence on this. I haven't seen anyone else talk about this. Obviously, the Kaspersky team is like running their big Burr engine of like code similarity, and it turns out that there's code similarity. That's not confusing. Oh yeah, I think again Ryan Narain's completely right. Yeah, we don't know that those were the only accounts, and it's very interesting how split up all of our understanding is. Right, so it's sort of like I talk about this in a little bit. But it's like you got Microsoft over here doing some work, you got Google doing some work, you got other people doing some analysis. There's sort of a rush to publish, but there's also like nobody has coordinated all of this understanding into anything real. That's a problem that we have. It's not just a problem with this group, it's a problem with every group. Richard Johnson got hacked with Chrome or Brave, and I think he specifically said that he runs Brave on his thing, which I think is very interesting because when Brave came out, there were a lot of us who were like, look, we love Brave. Brave is built on Chrome or Chromium, but there's things we don't like about it. Like, let's say Chrome updates, Brave updates later than Chrome, probably. They're not going to update sooner. They have a smaller team. It's not as high priority. They're all about privacy. So I think here's the problem. Is Brave okay to run? Right? Like if you're going to run it in its default format, is it okay? And I would say no. It's not okay to run. I want to run it, but it's not okay. And we have this bizarre other supply chain dimension that no one wants to talk about, which is you can look at the Git tree for V8 and look at the changes. And they don't mark, even if you don't have the bug reports. Let's say you don't have any of the bug reports, but you have the Git tree and you look at the change. You're like, if you see a change that might be security related and you have the brain to create a proof of concept for whatever that vulnerability is, perhaps, then there's a significant amount of time between when you see that go into the code base and when the Chrome browser gets fixed and everyone gets a fixed Chrome browser. And there's time after that when Edge gets fixed and Brave gets fixed. And then there's time way after that when all the other things that rely on that engine get fixed, like Adobe products and the cars that run Chrome or Chromium inside and like everything else, right? So it's very interesting. Like we have this extremely bizarre supply chain problem that we haven't decided to talk about. And what we have no discussion of is how do you limit the attack surface on this stuff? Zero discussion of that. And I want to talk about that toward the end of this talk, actually. And this is, I mean, he just wants to freak you out. He's not wrong. In many ways, the people who did not get hit by this got lucky and are changing everything about how they do everything. So I also thought it was very interesting that they only check for Kaspersky and Avast. I don't know why that is. That doesn't make any sense to me. Microsoft Defender's good. McAfee's good. There's a lot of good products out there, but they don't care. And there's got to be a reason for that. And it'd be good if someone could put that reason together and typey it up and then, like tell us what that reason was. So, yeah, these aren't high schoolers. Yeah, Jeremiah Grossman is completely correct about all the problems Brave will forever have. Yeah, I mean, Microsoft has a small army focused on it, and they have to. And I wonder if sometimes they're faster at fixing the bugs than Chrome itself is, because that speed is so important. And I also wonder if eventually they'll make different security choices, because it's just untenable to be like this. So, file formats. There's an Infiltrate talk coming out from Code Colorist. He's freaking amazing. I highly recommend you attend it. I've seen his talk 3 times because that's how many dry runs and stuff we do. One of the things he talks about is a file format that everyone in our community trades around like mad that's actually executable and cracks me up. And I was hoping no one would ever figure it out. But it's, to me, like a strategic attack surface that I wanted no one to know about. Anyway, so I highly recommend that. In this case, James Forshaw is pointing out other things where, like, because I don't think people realize that Visual Studio projects were necessarily, like, make files or executables, obviously. So I just think people just don't think about it. And now we all think about it, I assume. A Dwizzle, he's... The important thing about a lot of Microsoft stuff here is that they have this huge hammer that other people don't have in terms of a secure platform, in terms of trusted computing as a thing. I don't think that's the actual answer, but I do think, like, this is a really good point. But I also think it should be someone's perspective to say these are features that need to go into the cheapest base default Windows, instead of being an upsell, which is what they are now, and an opt-in, which is what they are now. So I don't know what decisions got made to keep it where it is now, but it's interesting that those decisions got made. So that's something that I like to think about sometimes with some of these big corporations who are making these decisions, is why did they choose certain things to be premium and other things not? And the reason may be it's just too, like, your basic home user does not have the ability to handle these kinds of decisions. But maybe that's another problem they should solve. And there's more coming down the pipe, right? So in the past 2 weeks, we've had that giant Google document on Chrome and Android. We've had, or was it iOS? We've had these iOS ones. And there's just so much stuff coming out that's like massive O-days. Just massive. And one of the things that I find really hard to understand with this particular North Korea event is the timeline. And I feel like the same thing's true with SolarWinds, because we always try to put, like, oh, this probably started here. But realistically, it, like, started like a year before sometimes. So, Jonathan, this vulnerability is patched on August 17th, or it's discovered on August 17th, or put in the bug handler at August 17th. I don't know when it was discovered. And I don't know when it was patched. And I also, here's another. The freaking Chromium bugs database is so full of just nonsense vagueness that it's just really annoying if you're trying. And the reason I go on and on about Chrome is because it's like one of the most important pieces of software on the planet. Like, we suspect it impacts Mac and Linux. We don't know, right? Like, hard to say. So, and it's just fascinating to me that, like, a lot of the metadata information that you need to make security decisions and understand incidents, all this other stuff, is not in the bug database where you would need it. It's just not. And it should be. And that, you know, the Chrome, this is the best run project I've ever seen, and it's still not where you would need to be to have a safe project of this type. Okay, so I thought this was a really good thread that most people missed. And it was like, someone's like, what's happening? This guy's like, look, they attack you with one day, which is this vulnerability, according to them. And it went into the October Chrome stable release. And I don't know when it went into the Android stable release. That would be something that would be really good to know, assuming it even affects Android, which I think it does. So there's so many unknowns, even in the stuff that we know. And I find, like, here's Zhang Guo messaging me, you know, and he messaged everybody. Like, targeting was really good. It was a really big team. It was a team of dedicated people who were really good. You know, and a lot of people are like, oh, why are you so trusting? Why are you so trusting? Actually, Rich answered these people. He's like, look, my job is a trainer. People come to me with projects and questions all the time, and this is how I do sales and marketing and everything, is I reach out to people, I talk to people, I build the community. And I think the reason this sort of thing hasn't happened before as much is that we do operate a little bit with a deterrent factor, right? I think the security community itself is not someone most nation states can pick on, right? Like, if this was China or Germany, or I'm just picking random countries here, or South Africa, right? All these countries have, like, dams and things that they don't want messed with, right? And a huge internet presence, and they're not beyond the reach of even a one-person, highly skilled team, right? So, like, if they really got Rich in Seattle pissed off, like, Rich in Seattle can do a lot of things to most countries. And that's a sense of deterrence. But I also want to point out, Here is an event that we, again, have SolarWinds and this one. The U.S. government is nowhere to be seen. The FBI is nowhere to be seen. CISA is nowhere to be seen. NSA is nowhere to be seen. White House. No one is like, look, everyone's got a lot to do. I get it. But this is the exact kind of thing you need to be in a coordinating position on. You need to be literally protecting your people. It's equally strategic if they hack all the researchers in every big company than if they hack the companies using Active Directory via SolarWinds. And I think we are underestimating the level of reach they got. We are underestimating the impact of this event, even though it's like a lot of Twitter noise. You're not seeing the kind of top-level policy work that should be happening on something like this to find out how to stop it, right? It's just bizarre to me that you haven't seen something in any fashion from the U.S. government on this. So maybe that's coming out and they're just really late. But really late is not good enough, right? Like, they should be individually reaching out to you. So, like, your community got attacked by a nation state. That is the hearts and minds that you need to win. Something about this, I just don't understand why there's this gap. Anyway, so, and also from a policy perspective, it's still, and Halvar will not stop talking about this. He's like, it is literally impossible for a user to get a forensic dump off their phones, right? So the only thing I've seen in the market is this ZecOps Gluon, which is probably pretty good, but like they're hamstrung a little bit probably by what the phone companies will let you do. And I don't see why that is. I think your phone could very easily come with a key fob that enabled this feature that you could choose to destroy or not. So there's a lot of ways around this from a policy perspective, but I think and when everyone's phones get popped and you can't get any forensics off them, I don't know if that's cool. And we seem cool with it. So Halvar was right 100 million years ago. So here's I think my hottest take, which is this. You know how like you get that like bubble wrap and you smack the bubble down and it pops up somewhere else and it pops up somewhere else, right? So when we smacked down Flash, and we knew Flash was a bad idea, that bubble just popped up in JavaScript, right? They're like I'm running this in JavaScript. It runs as fast as a native program. And I know that in order to do that, they literally cast dark magic spells every day in V8. That thing is not securable, right? And so if we don't listen to the actual researchers, we are again screwed. You are just Flash. That's all it is. So we need to understand that all the security measures we took with Flash, we need to take with JavaScript engines. They're not good. Like James Mickens makes fun of them. And he does that because they're bad, not because they're bad but securable. And the default for all pages needs to be off by like the same thing you did with Flash. So if you had Flash in your browser right now because you needed it for some applications, that should be how you're handling JavaScript. And it shouldn't take Amy to tell you that, right? Like, and I also think Microsoft here is wrong, because I do not think the answer is more hypervisors. Because hypervisors inevitably blend with your OS because you need cut and paste to work. And printing and stuff like that. So I agree that like, yeah, that's what we got right now is like for dangerous stuff we run it in a hypervisor. But realistically, we need to get over our JavaScript addiction and realize it's not possible, right? So it should be opt-in only, and that's it. That should be the answer. So, and here's a benefit for those of you who use modern computers, which is when they're opt-in, you don't get all those pop-ups about whether or not you can have cookies or not. So by default, you're more private as well, because you don't have to click through the accept or go through a maze of twisty little passages to figure out how to turn it off. So anyway, she's right. He's not as right. And I think we should strategically, you're just going to remember this talk when like this keeps happening, because I took her class on JavaScript exploitation and then I looked at a bunch of JavaScript bugs just every day for like 3 weeks in a row. And yeah, no one should run JavaScript. So here's my bonus duck things. And I want to point to Sean Heelan's work on heap overflow exploitation, which is, it used to be the team at Qualys and all the other good teams would just absorb an entire program's heap manipulation into their head and spit out an exploit. And nowadays, you don't do that. You build a fuzzer that just randomly does the heap feng shui in just a million random ways, and then, you figure out what happens afterwards, right? So this is it's going backwards in a way, right? They're like, oh, we found other ways to do the heap stuff by building a fuzzer that triggers triggers the program a million different times and then puts it in buckets. I think that's really interesting. And if you haven't read Sean Heelan's work on this subject, you should. I don't necessarily know that the Qualys team did read Sean Heelan's work, but nonetheless, good on them for that. And I think everyone should also go read Maddie Stone's paper on Project Zero because it was surprisingly honest. There's very few times when defensive people put out honest papers. This is one of them. The F-Secure one from back in the day was another one. She's like, you know what? We're just not making as big an impact as I thought we would be from doing all this stuff. We don't really catch that much stuff. It's really weird. And it's sort of surprising because this week, of course, we've caught a million things. So I don't know if that's a blip or if that's just a jump in style. And the question of whether or not something is sophisticated, it annoys me as much as like what people who really care about jiu-jitsu belts. I'm like, it's just not important. It's like something where like only a toddler could truly get incentivized by these sorts of things. And I also thought it was very interesting that like, the community of women who have already been much more private was like, oh my God, obviously this protects you. And so I thought that was an interesting little paste as well. And I want to remind people, you can right now go to this little URL, put $15 in them, and all 15 of those dollars actually go to a kid or something a kid needs. And I guarantee you they do need a lot of stuff. A lot of people out there struggling. So this is the charity that I support personally the most. But the need to scale this kind of effort up it's not one person, it's everybody. And this community's really been great in supporting them. So, and I guarantee you they noticed. Anyway, so that's my talk and my little pitch. And now I'm going to see if I can click back over to the magic. Yeah. So, what do you mean, even if the site uses JavaScript? Oh, yeah, he's just making fun of me. I did enable JavaScript just for that. So, yeah. And so, I mean, if we have Jonathan on the chat, I mean, I'd like to be able to use a more sophisticated system where we could just video him in or voice him in. He could call me on the phone. I could hold it to the mic. That'd be really funny. I mean, I guess I don't really want to put him on the spot, to be honest. But I hope that he and his team are going to share more about a lot of the other things that they know with this stuff, in terms of the timeline especially, which I think is very interesting from a lot of these perspectives. And maybe more of the strategic ideas in terms of, how is it possible to deal with the effort of securing these things? Yeah, the lawyers are everywhere in this thing. Like when you look at some of these things, I can't even imagine the decisions that you would have to make as a company for especially the SolarWinds thing. I think that's probably more difficult than this North Korean thing. But, I really, there's a couple questions in here I really want answered. Some of them are just technically related. But some of them are, where is the United States government on this? Like, there is nowhere okay. They should have already responded. And the fact that they have not. I don't know if they are involved just very silently behind the scenes. And my thought is that they are not, because we would see more coordination between all the players if they were. And I also don't think they could keep their mouths shut on something like this. So, all right. So hopefully tomorrow or Thursday, we're going to get more information. That's great news. I look forward to it, I guess. I look forward to, we don't know if this one Chrome bug
was the only bug they used. I would assume not. I would assume they had a bunch of different bugs. And like it doesn't make any sense for them to just have one bug. So anyway, that's what we got. That's the stream. Thanks everyone for showing up. It's good to see everyone. Next time maybe we'll try Clubhouse or some other format so that we can get people all together in a room. Although I kind of like that it kind of just records it. If anyone knows these policy people, please make fun of them for me. Cheers. All right. I will see you guys later. That's how I'm going to end it. I don't have any funny jokes.